What does it mean to be remembered not for the life you lived, but for the shame others carved into your name? In the shadow of Anne Boleyn's crown and her infamous execution, there was another sister whose story was whispered in corridors, mocked in foreign courts, and then buried beneath silence. Her name was Mary Boleyn. To the French king Francis I, she was nothing but the English mare. To Henry VIII, she was a body to please, a mistress to discard once desire had cooled. Yet within those cruel words hides a darker truth, one that history never resolved. Were her children the offspring of a common husband, or were they the hidden heirs of a king? Imagine two young faces, Catherine Carey and Henry Carey, standing beneath the glow of Tudor power. Around them rumors twisted like knives. Courtiers whispered, asking whether their blood was noble or illegitimate. No one answered. But the question lingered like a curse, and at the center of it all stood their mother, a woman condemned by scandal, trapped between royal lust and the contempt of her own family. Mary's life was not one of triumphs or coronations. It was a descent into humiliation, branded as a whore by a foreign monarch, discarded by her king, stripped of wealth and position, left to fade in obscurity. She was the first Boleyn to lie in Henry's bed, and the first to be thrown aside, punished not with an axe, but with the slow torture of disgrace and oblivion. Tonight we open the pages that the Tudors tried to tear away. We will walk through scandal, betrayal, exile, and the silent cruelty that defined Mary's end. Her torment was not crowned by spectacle, but by silence. Stay with us until the final moment, because only then will you see why her forgotten suffering is darker than her sister's execution. And if you wish to continue uncovering the agonies that history tried to erase, subscribe to this channel so you will never miss the truth hidden behind the throne. The silence of Mary's end is hard to imagine when one recalls how her youth began. She was not born into ruin. She was the daughter of a family with sharp ambitions, raised in halls where every word and gesture was measured for advantage. The Boleyns knew their place was not yet secure, but they believed their children could lift them higher. When Mary was still in her teens, she was sent to France in the service of Mary Tudor, the English princess who was to marry the aging King Louis XII. It was a dazzling opportunity. The French court was a world of jewels and color, of perfumes and processions, of music that flowed from dawn until midnight. For a young girl, it could feel like a fairy tale, but this fairy tale carried shadows. The court of France was also a hunting ground where beauty was prey, and a foreign girl with open laughter and youthful charm drew attention she did not yet understand. Mary entered that world unguarded. She was cheerful, quick to smile, untrained in the art of holding back her warmth. Among English ladies, this might have been seen as friendliness, but in France it was read differently. Every light step in a dance, every playful glance, every moment of unthinking openness was taken as invitation. She was not aware that in this court, perception mattered more than truth. Louis XII died within months, and his successor, Francis I, was a man very different from the frail old king. Young, vigorous, notorious for his appetites. He was surrounded by companions who shared his hunger for pleasure. They watched the English girl, and laughter followed her through the halls. To them, she was not a noble maiden of promise, but amusement. Soon, Francis himself spoke the words that would trail her name for the rest of her life. "She is nothing but the English mare," he is reported to have said, and the court repeated it with relish. The sting of that phrase was sharper than any rumor. It branded her, reducing her to an animal, a body for the sport of men. Whether she had truly lain with Francis or with any of his companions mattered less than the fact that he said it. In a court that thrived on scandal, the insult became her identity. For Mary, the days that followed must have felt like walking through a maze of mirrors where every reflection was distorted. Courtiers whispered when she passed. Some reached for her hand too boldly. Others smirked in her direction. Even kindness could not be trusted. For behind a gentle tone there might be mockery waiting. When the news of these tales crossed the Channel, it arrived in England not as gossip, but as humiliation. The Boleyn family had sent their daughter abroad to polish her manners, to prepare her for alliances, to elevate their name. Instead, she returned with her reputation shredded. She was scarcely 20 years old, yet already scarred. The French had painted her as a courtesan rather than a courtier, and that stain would never fully wash away. Mary came home carrying more than trunks of clothes. She carried the laughter of Francis I, the whispers of courtiers, the cruel nickname that had clung to her in foreign halls. No decree was written against her, no sentence pronounced. Yet the damage was done. She was back on English soil, but she was not the same. She had been marked, and in the ruthless world of the Tudors, a mark was enough to shape destiny. She returned from France carrying a shadow. Yet in the ambitious world of the Boleyn family, even shadows could be turned into instruments. Mary still had beauty. And in the court of England, beauty was never wasted. Her presence was not just tolerated, it was polished, displayed, and placed deliberately where eyes of power would fall upon it. The English court was a different theater from France. Here, her past whispers could not be heard as loudly, muffled by the noise of tournaments and the glitter of banquets. Henry VIII stood at the center of it all, a king in his prime, broad of chest, restless with energy, and quick to let desire guide his choices. He noticed Mary as if she had been lit by a torch in the darkness. His gaze followed her in crowded halls, and soon the court began to murmur. At a feast filled with music and laughter, his eyes rested on her longer than courtesy allowed. The moment was small, almost invisible, but those who lived by observing power felt the tremor. They knew what it meant when the king's glance did not pass quickly. Mary, still so young, was being pulled into his orbit. The Boleyn family did not resist. Her father and her uncle, men seasoned in ambition, recognized what was happening. Mary was already married to William Carey, a gentleman of the king's household. That detail, far from hindrance, offered Henry convenience. He could honor the husband while claiming the wife. One evening, Henry's words sealed the unspoken arrangement. His tone was casual, yet final. "She pleases me well enough. Reward her husband." From that moment, gifts and favors flowed to Carey. Offices and lands appeared in his hands, and everyone at court knew why. Mary had been chosen. For a time, Mary lived in the glow of royal attention. The shame of France seemed far away. She walked into chambers filled with music, into gardens where the king's voice dropped low, and into nights when the world was reduced to his desire and her silence. Perhaps she mistook that desire for devotion. Perhaps she believed the attention meant she had escaped disgrace. Soon she bore children. First a daughter, Catherine, then a son, Henry. Their births brought whispers sharper than before. Courtiers leaned toward one another, eyes glittering with intrigue. Were these truly Carey's children? Or did they carry the secret blood of the king? No one dared to speak the answer aloud. No one wrote it down. But the rumor spread until it seemed part of the air in every chamber of the palace. Mary moved through those years as if walking on a tightrope above an abyss. To the unknowing, she appeared elevated. She was the mistress of a powerful king, her children touched by speculation of royal blood, her husband enriched by rewards. Yet beneath the surface, she was as fragile as glass. The attention of Henry VIII was never permanent. What glowed today would fade tomorrow. In those moments of false triumph, the seeds of tragedy were being sown. Mary had been used as a bridge for her family's rise. Her body had become a political tool. And in the very favor that seemed to lift her, the slow ruin of the Boleyns had already begun. The favor that once lifted Mary soon began to fade, almost imperceptibly at first, like a candle guttering in a draught. Henry's gaze, once fixed on her, now drifted elsewhere. She still moved through the glittering halls, but the music no longer seemed to pause for her arrival. A smile from the king grew rarer. His hand no longer lingered at her side. She had been an amusement, and amusements were never meant to last. It was then that Anne entered the stage, younger, sharper, armed not only with beauty, but with a will as unyielding as iron. She drew Henry's attention with a force Mary could not match. While Mary had yielded to desire, Anne resisted. Her refusal only deepened the king's obsession. Courtiers watched the change with sharpened eyes. The elder sister was vanishing. The younger was ascending. Mary must have felt it most keenly within her own family. Once she had been the vessel of their ambition. Now she was little more than an inconvenient reminder of past indulgence. Her father's nods grew curt. Her uncle's glances turned cold. They had another Boleyn to champion, and this one promised not the fleeting role of mistress, but the throne itself. The silence that surrounded Mary was perhaps the cruelest part. No dramatic exile, no public denunciation, just the quiet withdrawal of favor. Servants who once hurried to attend her now hesitated. Friends who had sought her smile began to look past her. Even the walls of the palace seemed to draw back, leaving her exposed. In the letters of foreign ambassadors, the change was noted, though rarely with pity. One line survives, a whisper from Eustace Chapuis. These sisters were raised to ensnare, and England shall pay the price, to him and to many. Mary was no victim, merely the first act in a play of seduction. But to Mary, those words must have stung. She had been reduced not to a woman, but to a warning. Imagine her standing at the edge of a feast, the light of torches flickering across jeweled tables. Laughter rises, music swells, and at the center sits Anne, radiant with the attention that had once been Mary's. Henry leans close to her, his voice low, his smile wide. Mary watches, silent, as if witnessing her own erasure. She may have whispered to herself, though no record preserves the words. What remains is only the image of her isolation, a woman still alive within the palace walls, but already treated as a ghost. Even William Carey, her husband, seemed to melt into the background, enriched by rewards already given, with little need to champion a wife who had lost her luster in the king's eyes. Mary was not cast out violently. She was left to wither quietly, a punishment more subtle yet no less brutal. And so, as Anne rose, Mary sank, not in spectacle, but in silence. Her life, once marked by whispers of passion, became defined by the absence of voice, the absence of power. She had been a pawn, and pawns are sacrificed when greater pieces move forward. What remained was not the glitter of Henry's chambers, nor the cruel laughter of France, but a hollow place at the heart of her own family, in the Game of Thrones. She had been useful. Now she was simply forgotten. Silence became Mary's companion, but it was not the end of her story. Stripped of her role at court, she was left to rebuild a life from fragments. What she chose startled everyone. After William Carey's death, she did not align herself with another noble or seek the guidance of her powerful kin. Instead, she fell in love with a man of lower rank, William Stafford, a soldier with little wealth and less influence. The marriage was secret at first, hidden from the eyes of those who would never approve. When it was discovered, the response was swift and merciless. The Boleyn family, now fixed upon Anne's glittering ascent toward the throne, disowned Mary. They cut her allowance. They withdrew their protection. They treated her choice not as love but as betrayal. For Mary, it was a strange mixture of freedom and punishment. She had chosen with her heart for the first time, yet the price was steep. From the warmth of palaces, she fell into a life of modest means, where the luxuries of her youth became only memories. Gowns that once shimmered with jewels gave way to plain fabrics. The grand feasts of her past were replaced by simple meals in quiet rooms. The court spoke of her with scorn. To marry beneath her station was to confirm every rumor that had ever been whispered. She had been mocked in France, discarded in England, and now she was condemned by her own kin. Her body, once adorned and admired, began to show the wear of a harder life. Lines crept into her face. Her hands grew rough. Her health faltered. It was not merely poverty that wore her down. It was the knowledge that she had been erased from the story her family was writing. Anne glittered beside the king. George held positions of influence. Their names carried weight. Mary was a ghost among the living. To walk through London and be recognized not as a lady of the court, but as the fallen sister of a queen, was a humiliation sharper than hunger. There may have been nights when she sat beside William Stafford in their quiet home, listening to the distant bells of the city, and felt the ache of all she had lost. Perhaps she asked aloud, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Was love worth the cost?" No answer came, save the silence of the walls around her. Illness shadowed her more often in those years. The vigor of youth faded quickly, and the burden of childbirth, of grief, of cold winters without royal comfort pressed heavily upon her frame. She aged before her time, not in years but in spirit. What had once been brightness in her eyes was now dimmed by resignation. Yet there was a strange dignity in her fall. Unlike the glittering stage of Henry's bed or the brutal laughter of Francis's court, here in obscurity Mary was at least her own. She lived without crowns or palaces, but she lived by choice, bound to a man who did not see her as pawn or prize. The world might have called her ruined, but in the quiet of her second marriage there flickered something fragile and real. Still, the punishment of history is crueler than the punishment of family. Mary had become invisible. Her decline was not marked by scandalous headlines or dramatic decrees, but by the slow wasting of body and spirit. To be forgotten while still alive is a torture that leaves no scars, yet hollows the soul. Her last night came quietly, almost unnoticed, as if the world had already forgotten she existed. The chamber where she lay was bare, its walls breathing with the chill of early spring. A single flame trembled in the corner, throwing restless shadows across her bed. The silence was heavy, and in that silence, her life prepared to close. Mary's breath came shallow, her chest rising and falling with effort. The years of exile had hollowed her, but in her eyes there flickered a trace of defiance, a refusal to vanish without leaving some mark on the air. She turned her face toward the candlelight, as though chasing one final memory, though no one could say what she saw. A servant hovered nearby, the only witness to that servant. She was not the infamous mistress or the disgraced sister. She was simply a woman dying in obscurity. The servant reached for her hand, and Mary's lips moved, forming words too faint to hear. Then, with sudden clarity, she whispered, "Do not let them forget me." The plea cut through the room, fragile yet piercing, before dissolving into silence once more. The hours stretched. The world outside continued without pause. Carts rattled over cobblestones. Bells tolled in distant churches. The city lived. Yet in this small, dim chamber, time seemed to hold its breath. The flame dipped low, then steadied, mirroring the rhythm of her weakening heart. When the end arrived, it came without spectacle. There was no crowd, no proclamation, no clash of steel. Mary's body slackened, her eyes fixed upon the ceiling as though tracing an invisible sky. The servant leaned close, but no final words followed. Only the stillness of a woman who had once danced in palaces and now slipped into the dark without a sound. Her passing left no echo in the palace halls. There were no mourners in silk, no procession to mark her grave. She was laid to rest without song, without monument, without voice. The world did not pause for Mary Boleyn. It moved on, carrying her memory like dust caught in sunlight, visible for an instant, then gone. What remained was not the spectacle of death, but the cruelty of its silence. In her final hour, Mary's torment was revealed not in violence, but in the absence of witness. To die unseen, to vanish unmarked, is a punishment that outlives the body. The grave that received Mary Boleyn was unmarked, the earth pressed down without inscription or monument. No sculpted stone bore her likeness, no carved epitaph defended her honor. The silence that shrouded her death continued into her burial, as if the world itself conspired to erase her. Yet history is never fully silent. Whispers survive, carried across centuries in letters and chronicles. Francis I's cruel laugh still echoes when her name is spoken. Henry's offhand dismissal still lingers in the archives. And the rumors about her children remain like ghosts, haunting every genealogy of the Tudor line. Though her body disappeared into the soil, her shadow stretched long, entangled with the fate of a dynasty. There is a bitter irony in this. Anne's story ended in spectacle, her head severed before the eyes of the world, yet her name is remembered with fire. Mary's story ended in obscurity, her body fading in a forgotten bed, yet she lingers in silence, an enigma history cannot quite bury. One sister died with too many eyes upon her, the other died with none. Both became prisoners of memory, bound to a crown that consumed them. If one looks closely, Mary's life becomes a symbol of the cruelest form of torture. Not the axe, not the chain, not the cell, but erasure. To be born into ambition, used as a pawn, discarded, and finally left without witness is to be punished more deeply than execution could inflict. Hers was the agony of vanishing. Imagine a candle extinguished in an empty room. The smoke curls for a moment, then dissolves, and nothing remains to prove it once gave light. That was Mary Boleyn, a woman who danced in the courts of kings, who bore children that might have been royal, who once carried the hopes of an ambitious house, yet whose ending left no trace upon stone. But the earth remembers what monuments forget. The soil that covered her is the same earth that carried the footsteps of those who laughed, judged, and turned away. It is the same earth that absorbed the blood of queens and the whispers of courtiers. In its silence lies a truth sharper than any chronicler's pen. Mary Boleyn lived, suffered, and was forgotten. Yet her absence is its own presence, a wound in the fabric of Tudor history. So when we speak her name now, we call her back from the silence. We give voice to the woman whose torment was buried, not by scaffold, but by neglect. And in remembering, we defy the cruelty of erasure. If this story has held you, if Mary's ghost has walked beside you as you listened, do not let her fade again. Keep her memory alive, share her name, and join us as we continue to unearth the hidden agonies that history tried to conceal. Subscribe to this channel and step with us into the shadows where forgotten lives still speak, and where silence itself becomes the loudest testimony of all.